Good afternoon. Welcome to the recital of Muhlenberg's newly installed music minister, John Wade Meyers. I'm Pastor Lauren Eanes, the senior pastor here at Muhlenberg, and we're delighted to share in this afternoon with you. And welcome to our folks who have joined us online from all over. We're glad that you are with us. From the minute that Wade's resume came across our pile of resumes, the music minister search committee knew that he was someone special. From his emphasis on welcome and community and empowering people, to his extensive education and experience, we knew we needed to talk to this guy. And indeed, after our interviews, we found him to be not only a skilled musician, but engaging and personable, and someone who we knew would bring not just an incredible amount of musicianship and skill to this role, but would be a true minister in our midst, bringing a lot of heart and soul to the work that he does. Wade got his bachelor's degree from Stetson University and a Master of Music from George Mason. In addition to his music ministry experience, he has served as a teaching artist and an accompanist for a number of organizations and ensembles. I know that for me personally, all of that was great, but as soon as I did some online snooping and discovered that his social media handle was Sir Fugues a lot, I knew he was the one for us. We are delighted to have Wade doing ministry in our midst. And I want to give a special thanks to the members of the Music Minister Search Committee, Greta Willis, Malcolm Wilfong, Liam Whiteman, Judith of Karchik, and Kevin Stees. Well done, guys. You got us a good one. Without further ado, I welcome Wade Meyers.
I was planning to introduce pieces as I was about to play them, but this particular masterwork is so well known, it needs no introduction. Okay, I lied a little bit. So the second part of that was the first transcendental etude by Franz Liszt called Preludio, or just Prelude if you like. And what I was hoping to do with you all today is explore things a little bit, right? So we started off with this prelude, lots of fancy arpeggios kind of flying everywhere, right? Lots of strange harmonies as well, as Chopin and Liszt like to do. I would like to compare that a little bit to Bach, actually. So I would like to talk about Bach, and Christian has already locked the doors. We have 3 hours here on the Bach lecture, and just kidding. But I wanted to take it back to a Bach prelude, and since I got called out for my username, I might have to do a fugue too. And starting with probably one that you've heard a million times. By the way, feel free to stop me if you've heard this. Anybody? No? Maybe you have. But the reason I want to point this out is Bach takes what we call a figure, and he applies it to different chords. Liszt kind of did the same thing in that piece that I played earlier, but instead of making it all pretty, he just kind of like this chord, 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 this chord. We're in B flat now. Just kidding, we're in C. So here, Bach is a little more subtle, you could say. And if we put these chords from beginning to forward in time, and we just kind of flip that and just play them all together like a chord, we get something that sounds like this. So Bach is leading us somewhere with that. And it's a little easier to hear with these chords. But what I especially appreciate is Bach's sort of sense of direction, right? We're sort of gradually going to a certain place, and he leads us there. And the way that he builds up tension over certain things, right? So listening for tension, an example of tension, I think it was, and there's a couple of people here today who I'm sure can tell you all about how I'm wrong. But I think it was in 1613 that L'Orfeo by Monteverdi premiered, and there was a G7 chord, which a critic described as an ear-splitting dissonance. So it just boggles the mind today. But that's an idea of tension here. And that makes you want to hear this sort of relaxation, right? If we took a scale, I think you've all done scales before. Now, I've heard you all sing in worship, so there's no hiding now. So I would like you all to try just on a la, and we're just going to sing a scale going up and down, okay? Let's try this out. La, 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 la. Back down. La, 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 la. Yeah, we had a couple spots in there. Like if you imagine, if we did the scale like this. Right? It builds that expectation. And so that sort of sense of tension and expectation is what I'd really love for you to listen for in this particular Bach prelude. Okay? Let's try this out. Let's try it out. I hope you heard it. Some of the things that I find especially beautiful in this particular prelude is when we have this dissonance here, right? And the way he brings it down. But also the intensity of some of the dissonance. Most people wouldn't be thinking that, turn of the 18th century, we're going to be having these harsh harmonies. Things like, where's a good example? I think the best example is probably this. Right? That's pretty crunchy as far as that goes. And then he resolves it, of course. And one of my favorite things is we have this long build-up. And then it finally resolves. But it doesn't. Bach makes you wait for it, right? He could have easily ended it there. Easily. After... or something. But he doesn't. Right? He makes you wait. Before it actually resolves. And his second prelude, which is in C minor, I think also does this really beautifully and carries the same idea of taking a pattern through different harmonies. But our new pattern is... so really, it's just a chord with a little added. And I'd love for you to listen to how Bach uses this tension in the piece and through these figures to try to get a fuller, I don't know if I should say understanding or appreciation, but for me, that's where a lot of the interest lies. So this is the second prelude in C minor from Bach's Well-Tempered Clavier. That's kind of you, thank you. So the tension, right? Can you hear it? The way that this builds. And it sort of resolves, and we get this. And Bach probably could have just ended it there as well. But again, once we expect that sort of ending, we don't get it. We almost get it. Right? Not quite right. that note sounds fine, the C. That sounds good. But this wandering. There we go. Okay. Oh, no, not yet. No. Ah. And finally, it resolves, right? That's one of the beautiful things, I think, in Bach especially, though many other great composers do it too, is once you expect this final resolution and a relaxation of that tension, they almost give it to you, but then they make you wait longer. Now, I mentioned I would have to play a fugue because Pastor Lauren called me out. And conveniently, the fugue that follows this prelude is right next to it in the book. So this is the second fugue from the Well-Tempered Clavier in C minor. And what I really like about this fugue, much of what Bach wrote was intended to help teach other people how to play better, how to improvise better, and how to write better. And this particular fugue is like the quintessential fugue. Like, it's just like, okay, you do it like this, now you do it like that, and you do it like that, and you bring it all around, and then here you go. And that's what I feel like Bach is saying to me when I hear this. It's still a beautiful piece of music, don't get me wrong. But could you raise your hand? I know some of you, you definitely do already, but could you raise your hand if you do know what a fugue is? Okay, a handful of people. Good, excellent. So I'm going to give you like a super, like, in a nutshell kind of thing. Now, a fugue, you're going to have some sort of melody. You know, it could be anything. And it's going to kind of wander a little bit, and then something else is going to come in, doing the same thing. And then however many parts there are, like if you had, say, a tuba, and a, let's say, saxophone, or a trumpet, you know, if you had those three together, then you could have a three-part fugue. Each person would have a turn playing that little melody. And then you've probably heard fugue as in like a flight, or a chase, or a hunt, right? And the fugue kind of follows that process, where after each person, or each part, has had a turn doing the melody at first, they kind of will chase each other and follow each other around, and then that melody will start to appear in different places and then eventually brings you back home, so to speak. So that's nutshell. Now, our melody here, our subject as we call it, a little bit more solemn than Twinkle Twinkle, unfortunately. But it's lovely. After that, you'll hear so there's an answer to it higher up, but it's the same basic melody. And this process basically continues. And I think it's good for you to know this because I really like to play fugues as postludes. So it's handy. So this is the second fugue in C minor from Bach's Well-Tempered Clavier. the way that these sorts of things are treated changed a lot over the years. And I'm just going to get my phone out, not so I can text random people, but so that I can check how we're doing on time, because I did not wear a watch today. So I would like to fast forward a bit to, well, I did promise you all Beethoven, didn't I? Should do some Beethoven. So we're just going to skip ahead to Beethoven a bit now. And the thing that I would like to play for you is an excerpt from one of Beethoven's sonatas. It's a pretty well-known one. It's nicknamed the Waldstein Sonata, which is who it was dedicated to, Count Waldstein. And what's a lot of fun about it is that Beethoven does some crazy stuff. It's out there for the time. And I think you'll enjoy it. So this is an excerpt from the third movement of Beethoven's Waldstein Sonata. particular innovations that happened sort of near the end of Beethoven's life and well after. We can take a look at the music of Frédéric Chopin, who's eternally popular, probably the most performed piano composer, unless Mozart somehow surpassed him, which is possible. And his contemporary, Franz Liszt. Now, a lot of people think Liszt and Chopin were besties. This wasn't always true. There was a lot of issues. Chopin had some really serious health problems that prevented him from doing a lot of the things that he wanted to do. And I think that kind of comes across in the music. But what I love about classical music in general, if we call it that, is the breadth of the human experience that each composer offers. I'd like to play a couple short selections by Chopin to sort of give that, hopefully give the idea of that. This is A major prelude by Frédéric Chopin. As you can see, it's just a little miniature, right? It's this very beautiful little dance, really. And I'd like to juxtapose that against, I think I have that one memorized, it's fine. His Mazurka in B flat major. And in this Mazurka, Chopin's Mazurkas in general tend to be very personal and experimental, whereas the waltzes, as lovely as the waltzes are, that's how Chopin was largely paying the bills, was writing these waltzes that people really liked, and he'd submit different versions to different publishers in different countries so he can collect different royalties. So he was a very astute businessman in that regard with the waltzes, and it helps that they're fabulous music. The Mazurkas, on the other hand, he did some things that are a little unusual. And a Mazurka, if you don't know, has some similarities to the waltz in terms of it being in 3/4 time. However, the emphasis is very different. Often, the emphasis will go on beat 2. I've also seen it done on beat 3. So it can be interesting. It's a very different feel from the strong 1, 2, 3 that we had with chopsticks at the beginning. So let's go with this Chopin Mazurka in B flat major. So there's a piece by Liszt that I think will paint him in a slightly more, how should I say, slightly less bombastic way, as the Liszt etude that I appended to Chopsticks at the beginning. And Liszt had a whole bunch of pieces that are actually quite beautiful. But the one that I wanted to share with you is a pretty famous one. It's called Liebestraum, number 3. So it's the third, like, dream of love, if you will. And I think it's really fascinating how Liszt portrays this. And I think it's nice to have him, let's say, use his evil superpowers for good for a change. This is one of those that I have like 88% memorized, and then there's just like these 2 spots that I always forget. And so I want to make sure that I have those laid out as a safety net for you. I don't want that to get in the way of sharing it with you because it's such a cool piece. I hope going through the Bach preludes at the beginning and talking through sort of that direction and tension and everything helped or gave an extra direction to listen for in the music. There was one other piece that I wanted to play for you all. And, well, actually, there were several, but I was trying to weed it down. And it bothers me. For this particular piece, it's not so much, how should I put this? There's not really a deep lesson I'm trying to share. This one is mostly just for fun. And you may have noticed that going through music history a bit, I was considering going further, doing some some of the stranger things that have happened in the last 140 years of music history. But I thought Chopin and Liszt would be good. But we left out a pretty famous composer, which would be Mozart, right? So in between, Bach and Beethoven, we have this guy named Mozart. And so I'd like to share Mozart's Turkish March with you all, but it gets a little funny, so you'll see. It's best to sit down to talk into this. Thank you all so much. These last, however many weeks, 6 weeks I've been here, 5 weeks? I don't even know. They've been a bit of a whirlwind, so this has been quite the adventure. And thank you all so much for coming out. And I believe we have a reception afterwards, and that's in the narthex, is that right? Excuse me, gathering area. And I look forward very much to talking with you all and getting to know you better. Thank you again for coming out. It means a lot to me.